Have a seat. You know, you should sing that out every Sunday. You're not half bad. You're really not. You sound good. You really do. Augustine said, the one who sings praise twice. I wasn't being facetious. That's an old Christian maxim from the 4th century. In other words, it's twice as hard, it's twice as productive. I think that's what he meant. He was a bishop. I don't usually understand what they mean. I'm going to connect a lot of dots today. This is a very difficult passage, and for those of you who've been coming week after week, coming to church, we have been plodding, it seems, through one section of Scripture. It's the Gospel of John, chapter 6. It's called the Bread of Life Discourse. You've heard me utter these words the same week after week after week. So today I'm going to try to connect a few dots. When I go on vacation, I don't wear this funny shirt with the collar. I always wear jeans and a t-shirt, especially when I go to church, and I just kind of disappear into the congregation and just sit back and take in whatever the worship is like in that particular congregation. So there was a time a couple of years ago, and I was actually in Virginia, and there was, not on the back altar, but on the side altar, this incredibly graphic, and I mean really almost to the point of grotesque, image of the crucifixion painting. Really harsh, really, probably very lifelike. And it's startling when you walk into the church. It captures you. And the church itself was an Anglo-Catholic church. For those of you who are lifelong Episcopalians, you know exactly what I mean by that. For those of you who are not, that's a style of worship within the Episcopal Church which is very similar to the Roman Catholic Church pre-Vatican II. The only difference is it's not in Latin, it's in English. But the style is very, what we would call Vatican I oriented. It's the way liturgy might have been in England right before the Reformation. That's the Anglo-Catholic movement. Is that fair to say, Sebastian? That's an oversimplification, but that's the best I can go with it, okay? So I met the priest there, who, by the way, was a very young priest, way younger than me. And he was really into the Anglo-Catholic movement. And I said, that's quite striking. He says, yes, I got it for the parish. It's a gift from my family for the church. I said, so how do people react to it? And he says, a lot of people come in and the first words out of their mouth was, that's offensive. It offends me. It makes me uncomfortable. Would any of you like to guess what his response to them usually, at least according to what he told me, his response to them always is? Good. It's exactly what he said. 4-letter word. Good. Okay? Because that's exactly what it's meant to do. There are many things Jesus said and taught that were intended by him to be startling and striking and transformative and make us uncomfortable, unless I'll say the word offensive. This part of John's Gospel, it's when you study it and you pray through it and you hear it, you're hearing it on 2 levels. You're hearing Jesus talking to this crowd, saying something that was intended to be offensive, but you also at the same time have to, in your imagination, hear John the preacher, who was a witness to that event, preaching about this event before it gets written down into words, preaching to his congregation, which was probably Ephesus in the 1st century. A memory of John's church, of Jesus saying, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man, unless you drink his blood, and you can understand now why among the many charges brought against Christians during the times of persecution, and I'm sure you remember this because I mentioned this in confirmation class a year ago, so I'm sure this comes to mind, but one of the accusations was cannibalism. These Christians are cannibals, because they have a teacher who said, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And of course, you want to trump up a charge? There it is. Right, Logan? You remember that. Tell them that you remember it. Say, look him right in the eye and say, he said those things. Okay. But not only was there a memory of that, there was a memory of also that first reading that Peter read this morning. And I hope you caught why that particular reading from Proverbs was taken. Where when wisdom is personified as a person, and by the way, Bible study, here's a hint. When wisdom is personified as a person in the Old Testament, wisdom is always a woman. Always a woman. All right? The words, the Greek word, yeah. And Cynthia says, well, what's new about that? What is the Greek word Sophia is a woman's name. The Greek word for wisdom is Sophia, always portrayed as a woman. Wisdom says to partake of me, to really have God's knowledge and wisdom within you, you must eat of my bread and drink of my wine. And that's why the readings were put together, because Jesus tapped into this. So let me connect a few dots, and let me get you thinking theologically and focusing on what we do here each week, which is so important, as we come together to eat this bread and drink this cup to proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. You have to understand what sacrifice meant in the ancient world, okay? When you wanted to offer something to God, you brought your animal, whatever it was, and you would pray, have the priest pray over it. It would be killed, it would be burnt, and half of it would be incinerated, and that's the part you give back to God. It's totally destroyed. A portion of it, a tenth of it, you would give to the priest to live on. That was their food. And by the way, I don't want to have anyone's incinerated half pigeons, so please stick with your, if I'm going to eat, it's not going to be well done, okay? And the rest people took home and they ate. But what they took home with them was also the reminder that anything offered to God is transformed by God's grace. It's holy. So Jesus taps into that belief and says, there's only one sacrifice that will truly make you holy. It's the sacrifice I will offer. It is the sacrifice offered on a cross. But to participate in it through the symbols of bread and of wine, we become holy. So there's this dot connection that we have to hear John saying. Jesus telling us, first of all, when you say, partake of my flesh, flesh in the ancient world means my life, okay? My humanity. God became one of us. God participated in human life. And when you say that and take it to heart, God took on every aspect of human life. All our struggles, all our problems, all our battles, all our joys, all our temptations, all the working out of our relationship issues, all that stuff that makes us human. Jesus has experienced that. God has made that holy. You cannot find that without finding God there, if you look. And Jesus says, feed your heart and soul on me. So when you're happy, or when you're discouraged, or when you're angry, when you're despair, when you're beaten down, when you're disgusted, when you're dissed by others, when you're praised by others, remember I took on every aspect of that human life and I consecrated it, and you are never alone, because nothing is apart from the presence of God. And every time we participate in Eucharist here, that's also a reminder. In bread, not only is he present, he's present here among us in every aspect of human life. And when he said, drink of his blood, remember again, in the ancient world, blood was the sign of life. What's the point of kosher foods? Kosher food cannot have blood in it. Why? Blood belongs to God. You don't participate in that. Only God takes life. So the blood has to be drained. Jesus says something shocking. Drink my blood. What is he talking about? He's saying, my very life must be a part of you. Not just words in a book. Not just the history of who he is. But participating in the very depths and soul of your heart. You are one with me. And I don't not only walk with you, I walk within you. So why do we come here each Sunday? You don't come here to hear a good sermon. Well, I hope you do as a byproduct, but that's not the main thing. We come here to offer thanksgiving. We come here to offer Eucharist, to believe that when we participate in the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, when we listen to his words and partake of his wisdom, we come to him, we believe in him, we make him one with us in faith. And we come here each week to proclaim a truth. You'll say the words later. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And we come here to feed on him in our hearts by faith with thanksgiving. I actually want to give credit, a shout out to one Miss Kathy King, because she asked me once, that's an optional phrase to the presentation of the gifts. You don't have to say it. But she said, I wish you would once in a while because it really means something to me. Bill also has said it. And the more I've thought about it, the more I will say there is sometimes more wisdom in the pew from those who come and pray, from the liturgics professor who says, that's a right one thing, you should only use that phrase with right one. There's no reason why not to, because there's a truth there. We come here each week to feed on him in our hearts by faith with thanksgiving. And we come here because it's only Christ who is our God's true wisdom. We come here for the sustenance and refreshment in our spiritual lives that his wisdom provides. To recognize that he was the sacrifice who died that we might live. And we participate in something that was horrendous and powerful, his death, and the sign of God's awesome power, his resurrection, so that we might live. There are people who get offended by the symbol of the crucifix. We who come here each week are reminded it is the most important sign of who we are. It is why we are here. It is what sustains us. It is why we celebrate Eucharist. And it's the heart and soul, the substance, the beginning, the foundation of what we are as Christians, to take his love into the world. How about that? Amen?
Amen.
Amen.